Welcome back to another episode of Spiritual Teachers Podcast. With me today is my dear buddy and friend. I consider him a brother. We've known each other for many years. He goes by Ken, also known as Soul, which is spelled SOL. That's his spiritual name. Kenny is an entrepreneur, a coach, and a facilitator of men's work. And I'm really happy to have you on, Kenny. Ken, welcome on.
So good to see you, brother.
Great to
Yeah.
see you, man. Today we're going to be covering men's work. What is men's work? How men being called to step up into these heart-led, uh, balanced positions in society today, and we're gonna get as cosmic as we can as well. So we'll see where the conversation leads us. So I'd love to start out by hearing about your awakening journey, Ken, and start with that. So would you like to share
Yeah.
that with us?
Yeah. Sounds good, man. Just want to say thank you also for having me on here. Been excited to catch up and see you and have a conversation with you. So
Absolutely, man. It's an honor to have you.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, there were many levels, I guess, to kind of my spiritual awakening, right? And different events that happened in my life that really like just changed the trajectory of my path, right?
Hmm.
Um, I could kind of tell you the things that I think had the biggest impact on my life were actually like my addiction,
Okay.
and also an event that happened with my daughter that really changed my life. But yeah, my addiction, also becoming a father at a really young age was very challenging in many ways, and um, created the environment for me to really mature and like be forced to kind of grow,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I guess I would say, just to give you a little bit of a background, I I started drinking probably around like 15 years old,
Okay.
um, and started doing meth when I was about 16 years old, and they were definitely a result of me trying to like self-medicate. I had like a lot of anxiety when I was a kid.
Mm.
Um, and so the alcohol was a way that I was like, oh my God, I can relax a little bit, I can feel loose and feel like myself. And so alcohol was something that I used like really often as a young kid. And then eventually I stopped going to school and just wanted to kind of party and do drugs.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I try to kind of give you the short version instead of going to, too much depth. But like, um, I became a father at 19 years old,
Hmm.
and I got clean from meth around the same time.
Hmm.
And but I kept drinking. I kept drinking to kind of try to handle my stress. Being a young father, I got out there and, I didn't graduate from high school, dropped out, and then went to work and started painting houses. Like my dad, he was a house painter. And so the stress of being a father, getting out there, trying to get my own work and make money and provide for me and my girlfriend at the time and my daughter, right?
So,
And
yeah.
so I
So
started,
how
yeah.
did you get clean from meth? Like what was that process for you?
So I went to rehab at 18 years old, you
Oh,
know,
okay.
and this was just before my daughter was born. I was like, I gotta, make some changes in my life. And so one of those ways, I went to jail for a little bit for like a couple weeks because I got arrested on a St. Patrick's Day from drinking too much, and went to jail. And I was like, okay, I'm about to be a father. I need to get clean. And so got off meth, um, and really made that decision. Just I was like, I don't want to do this. I had lots of friends that were going to jail, going to prison. I was like, I don't want to go down that path. So I got clean off meth, but I didn't stop drinking.
Hmm.
And I was like, drinking is not the issue. It was the meth that was the issue.
Right.
So Um, so alcohol became a big part of my life. I was in construction, you know, drank pretty much every night after work, maintained to a certain degree. I would drink more on the weekends, sometimes watching football, but honestly, like it kept me out of trouble, and it was definitely not a very good coping mechanism. And then by the time I was 21, when I was 21, I had my first panic attack.
Okay.
It was like 18 days after my 21st birthday. And this was actually a big part of my awakening too, is the anxiety and the
Hmm.
panic attack.
Hmm.
So at 21, um, I was I was holding my daughter on my chest one day, and she was just a little baby, you know,
Hmm.
still. And and I like stood up to put her down. She fell asleep. I was stood up, and then as my heart started pounding, doo, 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 and I was like, "Oh my god, what's going on?" And it wouldn't stop, and I feel like I couldn't catch my breath. And I was like, "Whoa, what's going on?" I told my brother, "I'm like, dude, something's going on, dude. Like my heart's just pounding and it won't stop." And and it got to a point where like I felt lightheaded, felt like I couldn't breathe, felt like I'm gonna pass out, felt like I was gonna have a heart attack. I told my brother to call 911. Called 911. They came to check me out. And then anyways, I ended up in the emergency room that night
Wow.
and did all these tests on me. And I was like convinced I was gonna have a heart attack.
Wow.
And so that set in motion like just horrible anxiety. It was like a trauma response because I was convinced I was going to die of a heart attack. And I'm like, I'm going to die here. And the doctor's like, well, let's test you, see what's going on. They did a test on me, EKG, and they said everything looks okay. It looks normal. They're like, may just be stress. Are you under a lot of stress? And I'm like, no, I don't think so. I don't feel okay. And so that set in motion like constant panic attacks. And I just had panic attack after panic attack. And for the next 3 years, I'm in and out of the emergency room and thinking I'm having heart attacks. Like I can't breathe, can't sleep.
Ooh,
And
that's intense.
yeah. And so I'm like, but I also am a very obsessive person. Like, like I have to understand everything. And
Hmm.
so that led to me like finding some good books. I finally found a book on NLP,
Okay.
right?
And what is
But
NLP for those
NLP
that
is
don't know?
neuro-linguistic programming.
Okay.
And when I actually before that, a friend of mine, she had said, because I was trying everything,
Hmm.
reading different books on anxiety, like trying like nervous system regulation with breathing. None of that was really working.
Hmm.
Sometimes it just made it worse. But when I found NLP, it was through a friend of mine who she was like, have you ever tried hypnosis?
Mm.
I was like, no. She's like, oh my God, I did this hypnosis session with this guy and he gave me these tapes and tapes. It's a while back.
Right.
But
Right.
um
Cassette tapes for those that don't know, right?
yeah. She's
Uh-huh.
like, and I've been sleeping so good ever since, blah, blah, blah. It like worked immediately. I was like, okay. So I started looking into it. And that's how I kind of found NLP because hypnosis is based on, I mean, NLP is based on hypnosis.
Okay.
And so NLP breaks down what makes hypnosis so powerful, and like comes up with different like techniques to help people with all kinds of stuff. And it's also used like in corporate setting for people with sales because it's really powerful. It's like helps people understand their subconscious. When I read the book on NLP, the thing that really helped me the most, and I think this is something that like people who listen to this might something they might get value from, is like at the time I didn't understand. I couldn't stop my mind. It was just constantly going and like constantly worrying, and it was
Hmm.
very obsessive. And I didn't feel like I had any control of my thoughts. And in NLP, one of the things I read in there that stood out the most was like, you don't have to think about all the things you're thinking about. And I was
Okay.
like, what? I'm like, what do you mean? Of course I do. Like it's just happening. I can't stop it.
Right.
Right?
That's
You ever
huge.
experienced
That's a
that? Right?
huge awareness right there.
Huge awareness. And so I was like, okay, I don't have to think about those things. And so it taught me basically that that you don't. tell your mind not to think about things.
Hmm.
The subconscious doesn't work that way. It doesn't know how to not do things. It only knows how to do things. And so
Hmm.
kind of one of the techniques that I learned in NLP was don't tell your mind not to do something. Tell it what you want it to do instead.
Right, like replacing it with what you
Yeah.
want.
Right. You probably understand that. You right. So
Yeah, I've been
I said,
been diving
okay,
into that a little bit. Yeah, for sure.
yeah. And so I was like, okay. So I realized that what I was doing was just making it worse, trying to just not think about things wasn't working. And and also one of the things that was really powerful in that, it said, you might think of yourself as a positive person. You might feel, like mentally like optimistic about things. But if you're constantly worried and trying to prevent negative things from happening, your mind's in a negative state.
You're manifesting it.
Yeah. So your mind's in like manifesting negative things because your mind's in a negative state.
Hmm.
And so it was like, you need to shift that. And so I started to like notice like the negative thoughts all the time and just be aware. I'm like, oh my God, I'm continually thinking about what could go wrong and how to try to prevent that, which I thought was like a good strategy.
Right. Makes
You know what I
logical
mean?
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like, okay, if this is a possible bad thing I don't want to happen, well then, how do I prevent it? But
Right.
I was instead of focusing on what I wanted to happen, instead, I was focusing on how to try to prevent something bad from happening.
Hmm.
So that was really helpful.
That's a huge difference right there.
Right. Right. And
Right.
so, okay. So I tried to think about the positive things I wanted to happen. And I remember one time, like at the time, like public speaking was like the most scariest thing in my life. I had the most fear around, right? And so I was like, okay, let me see if I can like visualize myself um going up on stage in front of an audience full of people
Hmm.
and what happens. And so I was like, okay, so I'll try to visualize, all right, I'm walking up on stage, getting in front of this podium, and I'm seeing this crowd full of people. And I'm like, okay. And I'm trying to picture myself. And the only thing that I could picture was like my palms getting sweaty, my heart pounding, me not being able to breathe, and then having to walk off stage and be
Mm.
absolutely embarrassed
Hmm.
and ashamed
Hmm.
because I couldn't do it. And I could not get myself to even visualize me talking in front of people and being successful and then people clapping, thank you, and then walking off stage. I couldn't do
Hmm.
it. And
Wow.
so that was a big epiphany for me too, because I realized I was like, oh my God, if I can't see myself doing it, I can't do it.
Hmm.
Right. So
Yeah.
that was a powerful moment. That was a very empowering moment. I was like, okay, wow. So until I can actually visualize the thing that I want to do, I won't be able to do it.
Hmm. Because it all starts in the mind.
Yeah, totally. So these are some of the things that in the beginning really started I think they prepared me for this like process of awakening with NLP and hypnosis, understanding how the mind worked. And yeah.
So
And
how
so,
did you shift that? Like, so you're going from, these extreme cases, right? Palms are sweaty or getting an
yeah.
anxiety attack, you're walking off stage. So what was the process of shifting that and what did it shift into?
So I think like looking back now, it was like a being in a fear state all the time and not
Right.
really understanding it and not really paying attention to the self-talk that I was saying to myself and the negative things that I was picturing and how it was affecting me. Once I started to realize that, and they in NLP it talks about like when this negative self-talk or the things you say to yourself have a physiological response in your body.
Right.
And so they're creating, and your body is actually acting as if those things are happening right now, but they're not.
Hmm.
And so I was like, oh, okay. So the things that I'm seeing, the things that I'm saying to myself, um, that's actually making it more likely for me to manifest that exact thing that I'm trying to prevent. So like, okay, so once I saw that, then I could start to um when I was seeing negative things in my head or saying negative things, I would like literally like pretend like I was pulling it out of my head, crumpling it up like a ball of paper, and then I would throw it like that, and I would watch it go.
Just like leave your awareness.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
so it was a practice. And one of the things it says in NLP, it's like a muscle.
Hmm.
right? So you have to continue to practice these things. And then after a while, you'll notice a shift and you'll shift that pattern. And you've heard of like the term pattern interruption.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's a big term in like NLP and hypnosis. It's like interrupt the pattern. So I started to interrupt the pattern of thinking, and that interrupted pattern of my body behaving as if I was in danger
Yeah.
and
Like
have
getting attacked by a lion, right?
yeah. So it's like the fight or flight response, which I had never understood that before. I didn't know anything about nervous system. I didn't know about fight or flight or parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system,
Hmm.
you know. And so I think that was what really started to change. And then I started to get a little bit more control of my anxiety. And then after a while, like after it was about 2 months after I noticed I didn't have any more panic attacks.
Wow.
And I just had,
That's amazing.
yeah. And so I had been on anxiety medication for many years at that point, like Klonopin and Xanax.
Hmm.
And then eventually I was able to like almost stop drinking completely and then get off my anxiety medication. Right.
Man, that brings up a thought for me. I've
Yeah.
taken Xanax a few times, and what I notice is like now with the awareness that I have looking back on it, right? Like I noticed when I would take the Xanax, it was like I wasn't even in my body. I was like numbed out
Mm.
completely. And
Yeah.
then what would happen was a day or two later, all that anxiety that I was preventing in that moment would
Yeah.
flood up and just like
Mm.
take over me. It like 10, 20 times worse than
Yeah.
it could have happened if I didn't take it. And
Yeah.
it makes me think about energy and how energy has to move and flow.
Mm.
And it also comes back to those traumas and subconscious beliefs and patterns, right? Like if I address the thing that's causing the anxiety way
Yeah.
back in the beginning, right? Like of my childhood, maybe, then when I address it and heal that, then it no longer can arise in these
Yeah.
moments, you know?
Totally.
And that was huge because I was like, I'm numbing out and I could feel it. I was like, I'm just like numb. I can't do anything right now. Or,
Yeah.
most of the time I would take it when I would fly and I would just
Yeah.
be sitting there numbed out. And then I would get home and I'd be like, the tiniest thing would just cause this explosion of
Yeah.
anxiety. And I never, and so I just tried it a few times and I was like, this is not helping me in any way,
Yeah.
it's just prevent like delaying it and making it worse at a later time.
For sure. And, I will say, because I didn't have any tools at that time
Hmm.
to be able to manage my life, like
Hmm.
when I first got on, like, it was Ativan, and then I got into Klonopin, and then occasionally took Xanax. But like when I first got the medicine, I was like, oh my God, I can go out in public again. Like I'm not freaking out when I go to the store. Like I can handle everyday life again. Because I got to the point where I was like agoraphobic, dude.
Well, dude,
Yeah.
it makes me think that as you're speaking, it's like you were so energetically sensitive. And
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, right? Like
Yeah.
that even going out into public, you were picking up other people's energies
Totally.
and you weren't able to either hold it or transmute it or
Yeah.
ground it down or move that energy, right? And
Yeah.
so it was just building up inside, and then eventually, if it wasn't cleared, it would just come out as these anxious bouts, right?
For
Like panic
sure.
attacks.
Yeah, totally. And like, I mean, that brings up another good point. I think that a lot of us are born just very much more sensitive to energies around us,
Hmm.
and until we learn how to really move those energies, like you're saying,
Hmm.
and instead of holding on to them, it can be challenging in life,
Oh yeah.
right? So it's like, so this was kind of like my journey of being able to learn how to handle all the energy that I'm receiving and not hold on to it, not stuff down my emotions and things like that, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, this was all kind of that part of it. Now we'll get to the question you were asking, like the awakening part. So this is like all the kind of process.
Hmm.
Like like that was setting me up for like these bigger awakenings. Um, and eventually I started to get a little bit more control of my life, a little bit more, um, able to handle energy like we're talking about.
Hmm.
And then let's see, there's some pretty stressful things that happened in my life. Trying to think chronologically how they unfolded. Let's see. So I'll just go into like, okay. So there was a situation with my daughter, right? That
Hmm.
eventually happened a little bit down the road. Um, and I think I've told you about it maybe, but my daughter at 18 years old, um, this was after I got out of prison. I know there's a lot of the story that maybe we're not going to touch, but I'll just kind of get into the maybe the more of the awakening. So I ended up doing time in prison,
Hmm.
like from like 30 to 33, somewhere around there, right? Um, and when I got out of prison, um, my daughter, it was her 18th birthday coming up, and I I called her to wish her a happy birthday, right?
Hmm.
And she didn't answer, so I left her a message, but then she ended up calling me back. And on the other end of the phone was like someone that didn't sound like my daughter. It sounded like it was fake.
Oh, wow.
And so I answered the phone. I was like, "Hey, sweetheart," and she's like, "Hello, daddy," right? And I'm like,
Oh,
"Hi."
whoa.
She's like, and I was like, how are you doing? What's going on? And she ends up telling me, she's like, um, that she's been in the hospital for 2 months, that she got meningitis and encephalitis, and she lost any memory of who she was, right? She lost her ability to talk and to walk, and she had to relearn. And so the reason why her voice sounded like that is because like she was still learning how to talk again, because the
Wow.
encephalitis, her brain swelled and she had brain damage, right?
Wow.
And when I was on the phone call with her, and I realized it wasn't a joke, it was actually true. And she just sounded like a child. My 18-year-old daughter sounded like a child because she had brain damage. And I'm just like, ah. And my whole body just started shaking uncontrollably. And I'm like, where,
Wow.
sweetheart? And she's like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna call you back. I'm gonna find out where you're at. And so me and my girlfriend at the time, we just start calling all these hospitals. And anyway, so that was super traumatic. We found out where she was at. I tried to go there. There was like a password, like, because she was protected. Her mom didn't want me going there. And it just like devastated me. I couldn't see my daughter. I'm just freaked out. And I realized her mom didn't tell me that this happened. And I was like, my family didn't tell me this happened. No one, everybody had kept it from me. And I was just like, it just broke my heart in so many ways. And it made me so angry at my mom, made me so angry at her mother. I'm like,
Hmm.
how could you do this? How could anybody not tell the father that their child, this has just happened to them, this horrific thing? And then she almost died, right? She barely survived.
Wow.
So like less than a week later, um, it just all culminated. And I was at the time, I was still very much a person who shoved down pain. And I was just stuffing down pain and hurt as best I
Hmm.
could, using drugs, alcohol, whatever I, could at that time. And then I had this experience. I was in the car with my cousin and a friend of mine just days after I found out about my daughter. And my heart just like couldn't handle it anymore. And it just like broke down, and just like tears started flooding out from my eyes. And I was just like, oh, like I wasn't like ho, 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 crying like that. It was just like, oh, and tears just shedding down my face. And my friend was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No." I was like, "I just want to be with my children." Because at the time I had another son.
Hmm.
I had two other kids during that time. But this is more about what happened with my daughter that really triggered this experience, right?
Hmm.
And so just heartbroken, couldn't stuff down any more pain, and it just started coming up. And um, my friend, she said, "Hey, come sit up in the front seat, you know? And I was like, okay. So I sit in the front seat and I'm just like, like kind of like screaming and just like, ah. And then the next thing you know, like my body just starts to like, like curl into a ball. And I'm like, ah. And it feels like two big hands are just like curling me into a ball. And then I'm like feeling this. And at first it just starts happening slowly. Then it's like more and more and more. And I start to curl into a ball. And then my eyes shut, boom, like close. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? It just feels like it just happens automatic. And I start to get a little bit scared. I'm like, what's going on? And then I start feeling like hot. And then I feel like I'm wet. I feel all this pressure building in my body and building and building and building. And I'm just like curling, 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 curling. And at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm wanting it to stop.
Yeah.
Right. And and I try to open my eyes. I'm trying to like release it and it wouldn't. And I'm just like, this just keeps curling, curling, curling. And then I try to open my eyes and all I see is like this little bit of light through like the tears in my eyelashes, right? A
Hmm.
little bit of light. I could not open it any more than that. And then and then as the pressure keeps building and building and building, I feel like I'm soaking wet. And then I feel like I'm starting to get a little scared because I feel the pressure getting so strong. I feel like my head's just gonna fucking explode. Right.
Whoa.
And then I hear this other like sound, like someone else like screaming, like I was screaming, like and it gets louder and louder and louder and louder and louder and like closer to me. And I hear myself, I hear this other voice, and then and then right before I feel like my head's gonna just explode, dude, it just lets go. And like my whole body just releases. And I remember looking down, I'm like, why am I not wet? Where am I? What's going on? What just happened? The pressure was gone. And then within a few seconds, I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, and then I realized that voice, that other voice was my mother. Right.
Wow.
And and then I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, why did someone just put me through the experience of when I was born?
Oh, wow.
Right. And then I started to realize I was like, the pressure, the wetness, and even like the light I was seeing through the eye, my eyelashes, right? Like, and the tears drops in my eyes was the me coming through the birth canal,
Wow. So you
right?
were reliving your own birth.
Reliving my own birth, dude. And like, I was like, why did someone just do that to me? Because it felt like it was just absolutely out of my control, right?
Yeah.
And then I went from being in just the most heartbroken, agonizing space in my life to just like I wouldn't have used this word to describe it then, but I do now because I understand it. I was just in bliss. It
Wow.
was that moment of pressure, and then when it released, and like I was just in bliss, right? And
Wow.
then I was in a new world, dude. It was like this other space, dude, where everything was brighter. Like, I'm like my body's like reacting again, like right now. Anytime I tell this story, like I have to kind of tell you like in the way that it happened so you can fully feel it and experience
Yeah, I
it.
feel it.
Yeah. And like, um, and so I was just like in this other dimension, dude. And the pain was gone, the heartbreak was gone. Um, and then the only way I can describe it was just like everything became okay. And there was just no reason to be afraid anymore, no reason to worry about anything. And I like, so after that experience, we go up to my cousin's house and he lives in this cave in the side of a hill on like at this property that used to be an old uh, dairy farm.
Oh,
Right.
wow.
And so we were in this cave and I go in there and I'm just like feeling just incredible, so light in my body, dude. And then I get in there and I sit down on this like chair and then I look over and his stereo, it says 3, 2, 1, goodbye. And it's like my head goes down and it's like and I start seeing all these images and pictures. And then I come back up and I'm like, whoa. And I look over there again, 3, 2, 1, goodbye, dude. Like, and I'm like, whoa, pictures and images. And this happens like 3 times. And then and I'm sitting there, I'm like, what the fuck is going on?
It sounds like you were getting some sort of downloads.
Yeah. I was getting totally some downloads. I didn't know that at the time. It's just like, this is what I'm experiencing at that time. I didn't know anything about like downloads or spiritual awakenings, nothing. I was basically an atheist at that time.
Right.
And then I'm sitting there in the chair, and then I get this words just start coming up in like, and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to say these things. I know like I'm about to say some stuff, and I'm like, I don't want to say anything. And it's like, stop struggling with yourself, or stop, excuse me, stop struggling with yourself. Stop struggling with your father. Stop struggling with your father in heaven. And I'm saying it like that because I realized like it was slow because I'm like trying not to say it,
Uh-huh.
right?
Right.
But but it just comes out, and I'm like, what the hell? And I'm just like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then this voice inside of me goes, go find your children,
Hmm.
right? Go
Yeah.
find your children. I'm like, okay. I stand up and I start walking out. And my friend was like, Kenny, what are you doing? Where are you going? And I'm like, I'm gonna go find my children. And she's like, okay, but let me get Brian, which is my cousin. He's inside the house. And she's like, he's a little worried about you because you're acting kind of strange.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. And I just get up and I start walking out the driveway. I start going down the street. And she's like, is it okay if I come with you? I'm like, yeah, for sure. And then she's like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna go find my children. And I just start walking, dude. And like I I don't want to get to the whole thing, but basically, dude, for 7 days, I'm just walking. I don't really even need to sleep, like maybe a couple hours a night. I don't even really need to eat, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, I stopped smoking, I stopped drinking, and I stopped doing drugs, just with no withdrawals.
Wow.
And during this experience, this voice is talking to me,
Hmm.
and it's saying all these things. And then also I felt like a magnet pulling me in the front of my legs. And
Hmm.
I would just feel where I was being pulled, and I would just walk there. And I would have this conversation with this voice in my head. And
What was it saying?
all kind, dude, so much stuff. It was just like there was there's a there was times where um this voice was talking to me, like telling me to go find your children. I was like, you mean my children? And it said, they're all your children, right?
Mm.
And I was like, what do you mean they're all my
Right.
children?
Right.
And and uh and then like it felt like it was talking to me like Christ.
Hmm.
But I was very well aware that I was not Christ. I was
Right.
not Jesus. You know what I mean? But it felt like it was saying these things to me like I was like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized later on when I got into a relationship, because it's still like parts are unfolding. Mostly, I feel like I've learned everything since then, but like it took about 10 years for me to understand everything that happened, and it led me to like San Diego where I met you. It led me to SRF. It led me to understanding Kundalini awakenings. Um, and but like I realize now, I met a woman. Her name was Jennifer. I think you remember Jennifer. And I lived up in Tahoe with her. And I
Hmm.
explained to her, she's like, you received a Christ consciousness transmission.
Yeah.
I was like, totally, totally, it makes sense.
Oh yeah. I'm getting
And I didn't
chills as you're
know.
saying that.
Yeah, I was like, it was like I was downloaded the compassion and the experience of Christ, right?
Right.
Even later on, had during this walk at one point, um, I realized because I had lost everyone in my life, contact with all my children, all my family, everyone. And I felt completely alone. And at that moment, when I felt that feeling of just absolutely completely alone from everything and everyone, um, I realized I was like, this is what Jesus experienced before he was when everybody betrayed him.
Hmm.
Like, but it was necessary. And because of what I realized is that later on, I realized this is that I had to experience what it felt like to be completely cut off from everything, from our creator, from my children, from my family, from my friends. Like I was at a point where I didn't even trust reality. Like it just felt so surreal. It just felt like it didn't exist. I didn't trust the
Did you feel like you were out of your body for a large portion of your life?
um
Like looking back at it
looking back at it,
before 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 this all happened, like because
no. I don't, I wouldn't say that. I felt like I was probably too connected to my body.
okay. Okay.
Yeah. I felt everything in my body. That was kind of the issue.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And definitely tried to probably escape that feeling,
Right.
living in the head, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In that way, yes, but I also felt like very connected to my body and
Yeah.
everything, all the pain, all the emotions, all the everything. But so yeah, so anyways, that
Wow.
experience, um, you
So
know,
looking back at it, have you um been able to it sounds like it was one of your guardians, one of your guides
yeah.
was communicating with you. Have you gotten any clarity on which guide that was or from where
Well,
or any
eventually,
of that?
yeah. So after this had happened, um, like, or actually before this happened, I started listening to this guy on YouTube, David Snyder, who's a hypnotherapist and hypnotist and NLP practitioner.
Hmm.
And he eventually became someone who I got trained from afterwards. I was like, I need to find this guy. Like, I need to understand what's happening. I was just so that's why I came to San Diego was to meet him,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And his program, dude, this is the craziest thing ever. The program that he taught us during this week training, right? During the
Uh-huh.
whole week we were there, and 8 to 10 hours a day. And he teaches this whole framework for walking clients through this transformation,
Hmm.
right? And as he's teaching it to us, I see how it's like the same thing that happened to me during those 7 days. And I'm like, what the fuck is
Wow,
going
dude.
on? What the fuck's going on?
Wow.
And I was like, hey, afterwards, one day, I was like, I need to talk to you. I'm like, I had an experience in my life where this happened. I explained to him what happened to me. And and I said, and what you just showed me is the same like progression of these during the 7 days of what happened to me. And I said, why would somebody have put me through this? Like, and like, can someone else have done that? And he was like, well, there's what's called remote influencing, right?
Hmm.
And I was like, you think someone else could have done it? He's like, well, maybe it was you. And I'm like that blew my
Like
mind,
your higher self, right?
my higher self. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I was like, maybe it was you, like your higher self. And I was like, and I realized that's what had happened. And,
Mm.
and just to go off on another, like what I learned later on, like after working with the Sacred Sons and initiations, it
Hmm.
led me to this book called the Archetype of Initiation,
Okay.
which is the same guy who wrote Moore. What's his name? Robert Moore,
Okay.
King, Warrior, Lover, Magician,
Hmm.
right? Um, and in that book, he talks about that within all of us is the ability, like if it's necessary, if we can't find a sacred space for transformation,
Hmm.
we're in desperate need of transformation, that our soul, like our higher self, will create that space for us to transform.
Like self initiates us.
Self initiation. Like
Hmm.
sometimes you have group initiations, and there's
Hmm.
people who do rebirthing,
Yep.
process. People, and you have a sacred space. You know exactly. We create sacred space all the time, right? In
Hmm.
the work we do. Well, I didn't have access to anybody like that or
Right.
anything. I didn't know anybody,
It didn't
and
really
so it
exist as
didn't
much as it
exist.
does now. Yeah.
But my soul created this experience for me to be rebirthed um, on my own and created a liminal space for me to be transformed. And it's like I was never the same after that. And
Wow.
yeah, so
That's
that was
profound, man. I have strong chills through my body, man.
yeah,
That's an amazing story and really
yeah,
powerful experience. Yeah, I think with the age that we're in, which some people call the golden age or the Aquarian age, I think a lot of us are self-initiating and
yeah,
going through these processes of these massive, like huge awakenings inside ourselves, and these Kundalini activations
yeah,
and these rebirthings and things like that that it's profound because it's preparing for something way bigger. It's
Totally.
preparing for initiating others, it's preparing for holding space for others that are going through this to let people know that they're not losing their minds, that they're not like going through
Yeah.
some crazy psychosis or whatever they're going through. It's like it is actually an initiation and an activation and a
Totally.
and just like a true awakening, that's
Yeah.
that's happening around the planet. And I love to share these experiences and these stories with people because everybody's uh awakening is different,
Yeah.
and everybody has a different story, and everybody has a different walk of life, right? And so for me, I also had those years of drinking with my friends in college and everything, and I believe that I my soul chose that so that I could relate with people that are in that right now, so that I can
Yeah.
help guide them and help give them advice to help them move out of that, and to for people to know that there's a way out.
Yeah.
Because, for a lot of people, they don't even realize that there is a way out, you know?
Yeah. Totally.
And for me, just recognizing that our mind and this experience, this human experience, is limitless. We
Yeah.
we are able, and Christ was one of the best teachers of that, right? Like he showed what was possible as a human being. Like you could walk
Yeah.
on water, you could heal with your hands, you could bring people back to life, you could um turn turn water into wine. Whatever he was doing, he was a master alchemist, right?
Yeah.
And he amongst other things, he was a Reiki master. He was all these things that now we have words for, but
Mhm.
back then, he would maybe they didn't, or
Yeah.
they had other words for it. And so it's really profound to hear that Christ consciousness got downloaded into you through that whole experience. And then
Yeah.
from there, it allowed you to navigate and to manage your energy and to no longer rely on these pharmaceuticals, right? You stopped taking those after that?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Huge, huge, because a lot of society is, from what I'm seeing and hearing from people, it's like they're using these substances to numb out, to not
Hmm.
feel, to not experience, right? And like this ties into men's work because men are taught from a young age, especially in our generation and the generations before us, that like men don't cry. There's even songs about it from the 50s, 60s,
Yeah.
70s where it's like, oh yeah, men don't cry, like there's several songs I've heard where it's like part of the collective consciousness that men have to be
Yeah.
this tough guy. They have to go and provide and be like uh, stuff down, right? Like stuff down their emotions, don't
Yeah.
cry, don't feel. And now we've reached a place where it's like uh there's been a disharmony, right? Like some women are getting hyper masculine to take over and and to balance that out. And so what's actually happening is men are being called forward to connect with their feminine side, right? To
Yeah.
like embrace that side of themselves and then balance it out with their masculine side and be in that centered place of like being able to feel as well as being able to be that pillar and hold the space for the feminine inside ourselves, which is also the feminine inside everybody else. We all
Yeah.
have that yin yang, that masculine and feminine energy. And
Yeah.
that's the beauty of this journey and of men's work, is like being able to feel the whole spectrum, not making anything wrong, right?
Hmm.
And then coming to a space where it's like, okay, from this place, from this centered place, I can allow myself to feel all of it, and feeling is healing. We have to feel those experiences, those traumas that maybe blacked out. For me, some of
Yeah.
my traumas were completely blacked out until I was able to reach those meditative states, allow to myself to go into those subconscious spaces
Yeah.
and dig that all out in order to address it and rewire it, like what you were saying, right? Like reprogram it to a space of forgiveness and of compassion, right? Of like, oh wow, this person did this thing to me, right? Whatever that thing was, but where were they at? Where was their
Yeah.
level of awareness? What traumas did they experience? Like what how did their parents and their lovers and friends treat them, right? And like from that compassionate space being like, oh man, like they were actually just running a program just like a lot of us in the
Yeah.
past have and some people, we're all running some type of program. It's just depending on which program that is. It's
Yeah.
like, are we running a mainstream program that society's instilled in us? Are we running a program from our family lineage that like, okay, this is how you treat your child, right? Like this is how I was treated. That means that's how I should be treating my child. No, it's like we are the ones that break the program and we can bring in and completely raise the new generations in a different way.
Yeah. Totally, totally. I mean, there's a like you're saying about the about men coming back to more being able to feel and
Mhm.
being okay to be in their emotions, to cry, right? I think
Mhm.
for a long time, men have been cut off from that for sure. I mean, that's what's probably sparked the men's movement, men's work movement, right?
Right,
Is is because of that, because of the quote unquote toxic masculinity, right?
right,
And only living from half of themselves, only from the masculine, right?
right.
And cut off from that other half of themselves, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and
So,
and I mean, for those that don't know, men's work is, how would you describe it?
men's work. I know it's such a generic term for something, but it's like it's what we use and everybody kind of uses it in our
Right.
community. Men's work is a lot of things. Men's work is doing whatever you need to become more whole as a man, in
Hmm.
my opinion, and understanding where you're out of balance. Because men's work could be getting back in touch with your emotions, like allowing yourself to express, allowing yourself to feel, allowing yourself to cry. It could be that, or men's work could be, oh, I'm good with my emotions. I allow myself to express. I allow myself to feel. I'm empathetic towards others and sensitive towards others. Now I would like to shift and be more strong in my masculinity. I would like to be more decisive. I would like to be more, self-led and directive in my life. Because maybe some men feel more like they kind of just go with the flow. Me and you don't understand these things. People are like, oh, you're one of those guys who just goes with the flow. You're just one of those flowing hippie men, you know what I mean, or
Hmm.
whatever. Which is nothing wrong with that. That's great. Um, but I think men's work is just about understanding where are we out of balance? Um, what are we not seeing about ourselves and our own behavior and doing what's necessary, doing the work necessary to address those things.
Yes, yeah, I agree with that completely. And I would
Yeah.
add to it that like the structure, right? The
Yeah.
masculine structure, the masculine discipline. And discipline is, a trigger word for some people because it's like, what does discipline mean, right? It's like disciplining in a way of knowing where as a man we're out of alignment.
Yeah.
Like for you, for example, you mentioned addiction, right? Like that was out of alignment in some regards, right? Would you agree
Yeah.
with that? Because it was repressing and and numbing out a part that needed to be felt and experienced to be healed, right? It's like
Yeah.
the math. It's like there's men's work. From my experience and my definition, I've been in this field working with men and leading containers for, I don't know, almost 10 years now, right? And so uh, it's different for every man, but it is about finding that balance of the masculine and the feminine. If a man is too in their
Mhm.
feminine, they're going to be more of that flowy, just go with the flow, and they don't have that structure. And so when there isn't that structure, then there's issues with that as well, right?
Mhm. Totally.
And for men with too much structure, it's important to bring in that flow and that ability to connect to nature and to energy and to those kind of things, and then now what's happening is we're helping anchor in these men that are heart led. So
Mhm.
they're not being led by their ego and their mind, where it's
Yeah.
like, I want more, more, more. I want to just take, right? Like I want to conquer. It's about leading from the heart space and making decisions from that place, right?
Yeah.
Where
Totally.
it's like, okay, I have a decision to make, and this decision right now isn't coming from my mind. I'm going to allow myself to feel into my heart, feel into my intuition, which a lot of men naturally aren't very intuitive.
Yeah.
It's just the women are just naturally more intuitive. They have to
Yeah.
be. They have a child, they bear a child, they have to have that intuition developed for millions of reasons, right? And for men, we're the hunters, the hunters, right? And
Yeah.
and naturally we are born in a way to be in this way, but some of us are born very intuitive. But for most men that I've met, that intuition needs a little help, needs a little
Yeah.
guidance, and to be developed. And me personally, I was always very intuitive. I chose to lean more towards the feminine because the masculine felt so unsafe.
Yeah.
Because to me,
Yeah. Yeah.
the masculine was this father figure that was always angry or trying to uh, push down his emotions. He wouldn't feel. He would smoke cigarettes to avoid
Yeah.
expressing, and he didn't have any boundaries. He just would have these explosive moments, right? And I was like, I don't want to be like that.
Yeah.
And for me, as a young man, I was like, I'll do anything to not be like that, you know?
Yeah.
And to me, that equaled masculinity was unsafe.
Yeah.
And so I leaned towards the feminine. And what happened in the last 10 years was I realized I actually can mold and shift that masculinity to look however I want it to look for me.
Yeah.
It
Totally.
doesn't have to look like any other man I know. So what
Yeah.
I did is I would meet these elders, these awakened teachers, and I would look at my grandparents, right? Like my grandfather was a huge, beautiful role model for me because he was loved by everybody, right? And he was more on his feminine side, and I really liked how gentle and kind he was with my grandmother and with everyone. And he was also very funny, right? Like very enthusiastic about life. And so I love that piece, right? And then
Yeah.
I met one of my teachers, and he was very good at being a man of very few words, right? Like he would teach a lot telepathically, and he would say one or two words and everybody just got it.
Mhm.
And I really liked that part of that masculinity. And then I just took little pieces here and there, and I just started molding just out of clay, right? Like you mold out of clay. I started
Yeah.
molding this experience of a man that I wanted to be. And that was my journey with it. And what it
Yeah.
ended up doing was it ended up healing a big part of my relationship with my father, because then I was able to see him where he was at, what his programs were, all the ways he was taught, and how stern and strict his dad was with him. and create create a completely different version than he was, you know?
Yeah.
And it actually ended up helping him later on in life, now in the last 10 years, to show him like it was okay to soften. It was okay for him to feel. It was good. It was actually very beneficial for him to tune into this intuitive side and to meditate
Yeah.
and he's benefited from it in a huge way as well.
Yeah. Yeah, like how you said, like you were molding and shaping yourself into the man, your version of masculinity, right?
Right. Right.
I think that's super important. Um, because I think a lot of us, come in and we're given this certain like archetype. This is what a man is, and it
Hmm.
has all these, elements of what a man is supposed to be. And I think that we need to kind of remove that
Hmm.
when and say, okay, what kind of man do I want to be?
Right.
Right. And so that we can start to shape ourselves into that. And ultimately, that even takes us into like a conversation that probably me and you like enjoy even more, which is more of this like, you know, like soul directed path where
Right.
it's like, I think there's stages where, like where you said connecting the head and the heart, these are
Hmm.
definitely parts of you know, men's work. And Sacred Sons even uses like that was kind of their tagline for a while, connecting men to their hearts, right?
Right.
So I think it's a big important part. And also, like I think it's we're all moving into our true essence, our soul essence. And this is a part of how we do that. All these things are a part of doing that. And, you know,
Yeah,
so
absolutely. And one big piece that I've been really integrating for several years now is the inner child.
yeah.
A lot of people have disconnected from that
Yeah.
uh
Well, what's the
because
saying in men's work, right? What's the saying in men's work around the inner child?
are you asking me?
Yeah.
Remind me.
Heal the boy and the man will emerge,
Right.
right?
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah,
a big part of the men's work.
it's a huge part of men's work. It's a huge part of just being human for
Yeah.
for anybody, right? Men, man, woman, transgender, doesn't matter, right? Like
Yeah.
uh we healing that little being inside of us that comes out when we're triggered, when we're upset, when we're experiencing something that brings us back to a memory, right,
Yeah.
from childhood is an invitation, right?
Yeah.
It's for me, I've shifted it to be curious about it, not to have any judgment about anything that's happening in my life, whatever, however challenging it may seem in the moment, but finding curiosity of like, okay, what is this trying to teach me?
Yeah.
Like what is this experience right now trying to teach me? And then I take it a step further by saying, okay, is this part of a pattern? Because
Hmm.
from my experience, it comes in cycles, right? And it's not like a circle, it's more of like a spiral. And the
Hmm.
spiral keeps moving. And so you imagine the cycle comes back around and you're at that same point that you were right below in the spiral, right? And it's like either that has been healed and addressed, or
Yeah.
from my experience, it gets even more intense and more in my face, and I have to
Yeah.
face it even more head on,
Yeah.
right?
Totally.
And then the way that I can tell that that's been faced and healed is because that won't activate me anymore.
Yeah.
That little piece of that spiral, I'll approach it, and I'll look back at like a moment where in the past I may have like been super angry or super sad or whatever emotions were attached to it, right? And I
Yeah.
can I can be like, okay, I'm actually able to navigate this completely differently now.
Yeah.
Or, oh man, I did it again. You know?
Yeah.
Like I allowed myself to have whatever come up around it. All right. How can I with curiosity shift that even a little bit, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if the inner child isn't healed and heard, right? It's going to be the one running the show and we won't know it.
Right.
It's going to be the one that unconsciously is going to be making our decisions for us. I believe that.
Oh
I
yeah.
believe that most people, when they don't do that kind of work, they don't understand the inner child. Like as soon as they get afraid, you know, or hurt, then they regress into that inner childlike state and they throw tantrums and they'll do whatever they need, to get their way. Right. And then it becomes
Yeah.
the inner child who's running the show. And so the inner child, you've done parts work like IFS, internal family systems, and stuff like that, right? You're
I
familiar?
haven't actually dove into that, but
Oh,
I know a
dude. Oh
lot of
my
people that
God.
have.
You got to, dude. I think you would love it. It's so powerful. But like in IFS, in internal family systems, in parts work, it's like it helps us understand that we are multidimensional humans that have different parts of us that are inside.
Yeah.
We really need to acknowledge and and pay attention to in order to start to bring us all online, or else we'll have parts that are working against each other and we don't even understand it. And so the inner child, if it's still hurt and doesn't feel like its needs were met, right, it's going to fight against the mature part of you, and keep us stuck.
Right.
It'll keep us stuck and we won't be able to grow, you know. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. What's fascinating for me is like there's a lot of it doesn't matter the age
yeah,
of the human. You can be 96 years old and still be have an unintegrated part of yourself that is still really hurt
yeah.
and lashing out because that cycle just keeps spiraling up, you know?
I
And
would argue that like probably 95% of 90-year olds are still just like hurt children and they don't even understand it.
yeah, yeah,
I think it's actually rare for people to fully mature and and heal those things. You know what I mean? I think that's actually really rare.
I agree. I agree. And those people that have healed it, uh I think that there's a term that I like to use for that. It's a true elder.
Yeah, yeah,
Somebody
true.
who's truly
Totally.
worked on themselves for many years, has
Yeah,
addressed their stuff, has
yeah,
really navigated through those things. And and also I believe true elders don't have to be old.
yeah,
They can be, in their 40s, 50s,
yeah,
60s, and somebody who and then there's that piece where it's like when you get to those later years in life, you start to actually become more childlike. You start to become naturally more connected to spirit, more
yeah,
intuitive, more of these things, right? And the people that have matured and done so much work, which they're so few and rare
yeah,
nowadays, but there's becoming more and more of them
yeah,
because more and more people are diving into this work.
yeah. Well, I think this conversation is naturally kind of progressing into an area which is one of my favorite areas, which is like how do you fully mature and heal these parts of ourselves and to eventually become a true elder, right?
Hmm.
And so rite of passage,
Hmm.
rites of passage, right? And in like real true initiations, I believe, are what make that possible. Otherwise, like I'm a grandfather. I've
Hmm.
got I've got I've got a grandson. I've got three children that are all grown now. All my youngest is 21.
Hmm.
But like I could have grandchildren and still be just a hurt child running around like with my insecurities and immature thinking
Hmm.
and this deep desire for constant validation that I'm worth something, right?
Right.
So so how do we solve that issue? Because it's not just enough to have a child to become initiated. That can be part of an initiation,
Hmm.
but
And it's a
to
huge one
me,
for a lot of people.
it is, and it can be, but there are other stages and initiations that help complete these things, right? That
Absolutely.
and so we could talk about that a little bit, maybe just
Yeah.
kind of. So you're familiar with rites of passage and you understand these types of things. And there are many types of rites of passage out there. There's vision quests, right? There's um, where they take out guys into the wilderness, leave them on their own for 3 days and fasting and,
No food or
like
water.
no food or water. And that can be a powerful, initiation for men and can definitely help them, become more mature men, know that they can take care of themselves. Right.
It's a powerful one. I just had my
Yeah.
second year last year,
Yeah.
and I'm committed to a 4-year Vision Quest,
Yeah.
and because it's for the four directions, north, south, east, west, right?
Yeah.
And each year with Vision Quest, I'm gonna come out with a separate podcast about this too, to really
Yeah.
dive into Vision Quest with an elder. But it's a really powerful initiation because you're out there with nothing, just
Yeah.
nature, yourself, and if it's done correctly, uh, and held correctly, meaning the people that are doing it are trained correctly, and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. In a lot of native cultures, in America at least, Vision Quest is a huge part of becoming a man,
Yeah.
and 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 now for women as well, of
Yeah.
becoming your true embodied self,
Yeah.
and it's so powerful because in the Vision Quest that I've been to, you get taken into the spirit realm, and in the spirit realm, there's a whole nother layer of this dimension that you have to face,
Hmm.
and but that's as far as I'll go into it. Just that it is a really, really powerful initiation. Um,
Yeah.
I know another one that is really powerful warrior medicine is combo.
Yeah.
Do you want to
For
talk a little
sure.
bit about that?
Yeah, I could say a little bit about that. I think um, this is kind of the work I did. I don't know if I mentioned it to you before, but like I designed three different trainings that were 3 levels. And the first one it was called The Rights. It was like a 3-month program. I would lead these groups through of men. And the first one was
Amazing.
called The Rights. And it was like an exploration, deep exploration into rites of passage and the different types of rites of passage throughout culture. And then eventually, the end of the program was where guys would design their own rite of passage because I
Mm.
believe it was a self initiation,
Hmm.
using the group, as support to do that.
Hmm.
And so they would learn about the rites of passage, different rite of passages and cultures. And combo is definitely, one of those warrior rite of passage experience. Is I used to work with Edward Duell, who we both know, who's a
Hmm.
combo, one of the best combo facilitators in the world, in my opinion.
Hmm.
And we used to do combo brotherhood, which we would lead guys through. In combo, for those of you who don't know, is a medicine from the green monkey tree frog down in the Amazon and all over South America, actually.
Hmm.
Um, and it excretes this venom, which they use as a form of medicine. And and they would have these ceremonies, combo ceremonies, where you've been through these and I've been through these, where they burn, your skin, which they call points or gates, and then they apply the medicine um, to your skin, different areas in your body, which reacts in your system and without getting into the whole science behind it, it makes you throw up, it makes you shit, it makes you purge in all kinds of different ways, sweat, cry,
And it's
shake.
yeah, and
Yeah,
I'd add to it that it's working on many different levels.
totally.
It's not just the body, it's working on the energetic bodies, it's working on
Yeah,
trauma, it's working on all these parts of of self that is holding any stuck energy.
yeah. Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual,
Hmm.
all the levels for sure. So
Yeah.
it's a powerful, rite of passage for men. They can go through something like that. It really challenges them, pushes them to their edge because it's scary as fuck.
Oh
Your
yeah.
body sometimes reacts like it's gonna die. It thinks it's gonna
Right.
die. And
Because
you have to kind of,
you are basically poisoned.
yeah. And
You are
so,
poisoned in that moment, but it's a very, very low dose. So the
yeah,
body basically can purge out that poison,
yeah,
and you drink a lot of water so that it all flushes out. Um,
yeah,
and yeah, it's an amazing initiation for men
totally. And
and
so,
women as well.
and by the way, women typically handle combo better than men as far as like their reaction to it. They can usually kind of sit there a little stronger. Men will be on the ground like, oh my God, when is it going to
Yeah,
stop?
yeah.
And but women a lot of times do real well. There's reasons and theories behind that, but anyways, so there's different kinds of initiations and rites of passage. And what I after studying this kind of work for many years and teaching it, and also using what happened in my own life is as teaching, I I help men understand that there's things that are missing from almost every rite of passage. And uh, Joseph Campbell was the one that really brought this to my attention. I think this is missing in all men's work, but I brought to the men that I worked with in my group, right?
Hmm.
Which is called moksha men. Um, and moksha means liberation. But
Hmm.
anyways, so the one missing piece that I think that keeps men stuck, and maybe you'll understand this and relate to this, is their relationship to their mother.
That's huge.
Okay. And and when I read the book, I guess it's almost 10 years ago now, the Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell. Have you read that?
No.
Dude, it's he's the one that came up with the term here, the hero's journey, right? Or they call
Okay.
the myth,
Hmm.
right? And there we could go down that rabbit hole too and share all about that work. It's powerful. But when I read in that book, it said, um, when a young man uh is growing up, if the relationship between him and his mother isn't severed, right,
Hmm.
then he will continue to do things that on the surface like look self-destructive.
Hmm.
And so he has a whole chapter about this. And so the way I would explain it to these guys is I would help them understand when your mother's pregnant with you and she gives birth to you, right?
Hmm.
There's a cord that's connected to her,
Right.
right? It's a physical cord, the umbilical cord. It has
Hmm.
to be cut. And it has to be cut so that you can now come into this new world outside of the womb. And so that you can grow and develop into a different being,
Right.
right? And so I had all these stages of development for men that were I called womb stages, right?
Mm.
Okay. And then so without getting into the whole description of that, we can maybe talk about it another time. But like there becomes a time where there's another rite of passage because the first rite of passage of any human being goes through is the passage through the birth canal, which actually relates to my rebirthing experience.
Right.
Okay. And we repeat these same cycles of birth, right, throughout our whole life.
Hmm.
And they're always painful.
Yeah.
Okay. It's meant to be that way. So the rite of passage that the first one we go through is when you get pushed through the birth canal. It's meant to be painful for the mother and the child.
Hmm.
It's supposed to be that way. So the next real rite of passage that needs to take place is when the boy becomes a man and he has to leave the safety and comfort of the family unit, right? Which is another form of a womb where he's nurtured and taken care of to a certain time, and then he must leave, just like you must exit the womb. You must leave the womb of the family,
Right.
and then at that time there is a cord, but it's an energetic cord
Right.
that ties him to that womb or ties him to the mother still,
Hmm.
and and it needs to be completely severed, right?
Hmm.
And so that the boy can develop and become a man. And there's many ways that can happen, but the main thing is I would teach men that they have to understand what is your relationship to your mother,
Right.
right? Is she too involved in your life? Are you talking to her all the time still as a grown man and you're making decisions because of her influence?
Hmm.
Okay, then that needs to stop.
Right.
Okay. Because that's keeping a man from fully developing. Or is it like me? I didn't have a good relationship with my mother, but I still was connected to her and I didn't understand that because I was
Yeah.
connected to her through my hate for her.
Mm.
Okay.
That's huge.
Okay. And so like some men are too connected to their mothers because they have this deep love and feel an obligation to become the man that they feel like she wants him to be,
Hmm.
which is the energetic cord, right?
Right.
Or they're like, I hate my mom. Or they might be like, I don't care about my mom. Not I'm indifferent, right? These
Right.
are all ways we stay like connected, and we have to address these things. And so for me, the journey was making peace with my mother, loving her. And there's a whole experience I could share around that. But anyways, but the bottom line was I had to let go of my hatred and resentment, and I had to shift that relationship, which I did. And
Hmm.
once I did, then I started to actually grow and become a man. And I was no longer um, tied to my mother in the same way. And she no longer looked at me in the same way. She no longer felt like she needed to take care of me. She no longer felt worried about the man I was going to become. And she realized, oh, he's good now. And we don't argue anymore. We love each other. We hug when we see each other. She
That's
doesn't try
beautiful.
to do, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she's never calling me like, is everything okay? Do you have enough money? Are you working? Blah, blah, blah. None of
Hmm.
that,
Hmm.
you know?
And
So
it all
anyways,
starts because you did it internally.
that's because I did it internally because I saw because I remember at the time, this was 10 years ago. And when I first moved to San Diego, and my uh, ex-wife, my wife at the time, she was like, you need to address the relationship with your mother. And I was like, I have. I don't talk to that bitch.
Right.
I'm like, I'm good. We don't
Yeah.
talk. That's the best thing I can do.
Hmm.
We're not involved in each other's life. And I didn't realize that that was actually still keeping me connected to her. And it was affecting me and keeping me from fully developing as a man. Right.
Right. And it
So,
was, I'm sure there was a lot of subconscious that was coming out onto your romantic relationships, right?
oh yeah, totally. Because if you haven't addressed the relationship with your mother, right, and you haven't gone through that rite of passage, cutting that cord,
Hmm.
right, then you will always unconsciously turn your mother, your girlfriend or your wife into your mother.
Yep. And they call
Always.
that, for those that don't know, it's called a projection. And it
Yeah.
happens naturally a
It will
lot,
always happen.
often.
It's probably 90% of relationships, if not more, when a man gets hurt emotionally, he feels like you need to make me feel better.
Right.
You need to tell me something so that I feel better about myself. They
Something
don't even build it.
external is gonna solve
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. And they end up like turning their girlfriends or their partners or their wives into their mothers.
Hmm.
And
Okay, and
then,
so
yeah.
the best way for those listeners that are
Yeah.
listening, the best way to address that and solve that, what would you recommend?
Is to um, have the courage to take a look at it. And here's the thing: is like there's many signs that men can can look at to tell them where they're at with their relationship, right?
With their mom.
Yeah, and they can look at their relationship with their partner or their girlfriend, or if they're not in a relationship, what's your relationship with your mother right now,
Hmm.
right? Did you ever get to a point to where where you realized, that the relationship has shifted and your mother no longer sees you as a boy, right?
Right. Right.
Do you see yourself as a man, right? Do you see yourself?
That's a huge part right there. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, I would say the place to start is to go, okay, just to question, okay, is my relationship with my mother, whether maybe she died when you were young, that can still keep you tied to your mother because you haven't figured out a way to take a look at that and see what's going on. How has that affected you,
Hmm.
right? How has that affected you in your life? Maybe your mom wasn't there, but maybe there was a woman in your life that represents your mom. Maybe what's that relationship like? Because we'll
Right.
project onto her a stepmom or even a teacher or a woman in your life or an aunt,
Right.
whatever. Or even your father. If you didn't have a mother and you're raised by your father, like he could also be your mother. You just don't realize it.
Right.
Both of it. And it goes vice versa with men and women. So
Yeah, and
like,
yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna add that, like, a huge part for me has been the more that I clear out these patterns and this trauma inside myself, it's allowed me and working with different plant medicines has been huge.
Yeah.
Uh, those kind of things allowed me to have more of an awareness to, like Einstein says, you have to look at it from a different perspective in order for anything to change, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, raising that awareness has allowed me to see sometimes even in the moment as I'm having a conflict or an argument with a partner that, oh wow, actually right now in this moment, and I've had this happen in the past and sometimes even now, right? Like where I'll look and I'm like, oh wow, like right now I am my father and
Yeah.
you're my mother. Like
Yeah.
that's the interaction we're having right now.
Yeah.
And I'm reacting like this because at some point, or maybe for several times, I've watched this interaction with my parents and I actually took some of that on because I thought that that's how I should relate.
Yeah.
And it's my responsibility and my job to clear that and to shift that because that's not healthy and it's not helping
Yeah.
anyone. Nobody
Totally.
is no in those moments most both parties aren't feeling seen or heard or safe or those kind of things, you know? And it's like, okay, now that I have the awareness of it, I choose to shift the way I'm managing this and the way that I interact.
Totally. Which honestly, it's, we're talking about it now and like as if it's, not too difficult. You just make a choice. But honestly, it can be one of the most difficult things a person can go through because it's going to be challenging. It's going to be painful. And the way it can be really painful is it can be like, oh my God, like I'm still just a fucking little boy inside.
Right.
And it's causing problems in my life. And that can be humbling, it can make us
Yep.
feel ashamed.
Hmm.
Right. And so when I dealt with the guys in the group, I tried to be very sensitive to that, but also like be direct,
Hmm.
and be like, listen, it's okay. You didn't have anybody to help you understand these things or guide you through it, you know? Um, and that's okay, but you have to look at it now and do something about it.
Right.
Because honestly, I believe most of the problems in the world, most of the problems globally in every culture in our government is because we have a bunch of hurt little boys and little girls
Hmm.
in positions of authority, and they're making decisions from that place instead of as grown men and grown women.
Yeah, they're a lot of it is also lacking compassion because there's resentment towards their parents.
Yeah, you can't have true compassion if you're still a hurt kid because your hurt and your wounds and your needs for validation trump everything else. So you can't be fully compassionate to anyone else.
Right.
You can't because you haven't yet even given it to yourself yet.
Right. It has to start with self. It all has
Yeah.
to start with self.
Yep. So I mean that goes into like that's part of my mission on earth. I feel like is to is to help build men and women. My mission has been mostly men up to this point, but I feel like is to like spread this message and help people understand that that they are still hurt little kids inside and they need to be healed, fully healed leaders because that's the only way we bring in the new earth. That's the only
Exactly.
way.
It
Otherwise,
has to start internally inside.
yeah, which, brings me into something that I see nowadays, what's going on. We've all been exposed to all the politics. I don't care. Even if you're not into politics, everybody knows what's going on in the world.
Right.
And everybody, whatever side you're on, Democrat, Republican, or if you're independent or whatever, you're seeing what's going on. And I think that most of us who can just observe can see that Trump is still a hurt little boy inside,
Hmm.
seeking validation. Tell me how great I am. I want to be the best. I want to be the best president ever. Am I the best president? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Yay, we won. I've got to win because if I don't win, then I don't feel like I'm good enough.
Well, you
Right?
know what? It actually is working in our favor in a lot of ways because by
Yeah,
by him wanting to be the best, it it's causing him to really look at all these things that have been in the shadows for so long.
totally. Totally. And I think, I have seen some humility after his assassination attempt. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think there's been some change. But I think what I noticed is just with everybody, dude. When I saw Joe Biden and him at the debates, did you see that?
Just clips of it.
Oh my God, dude, it was embarrassing. I'm like, these are the two men that are fighting for power for the the greatest nation on the earth
Right.
for for having that much influence, and they're just like little kids. And he's like, "Oh, my golf score is better than yours. Oh, you suck at golf." It's
Well,
like,
it's like avoiding the bigger, more important things. It's just kind of like small talk, right? Like that stuff doesn't interest me, and it hasn't for many years.
yeah,
Even when I was young, like even when I was in college and stuff, like fully quote unquote in the matrix, right? Like small
yeah,
talk was never interesting to me because what it doesn't do anything. It doesn't make anybody feel seen or heard or like it's like how are you? Good, good. Okay, see ya. And it's like I want to
more
feel
depth.
you.
Yeah,
I want to connect to your heart. I want to actually know what's going on for you, even if it's something really deep happening,
yeah,
and I try to surround myself with people that allow for that, and
yeah,
and are open enough to connect heart to heart. And
yeah,
I've recently in the last 3 months have gone back to working in with kids in physical therapy, and in that environment, it's really interesting because there really isn't space for that,
yeah,
right? Like there it's just like, okay, you're doing your thing, I'm doing my thing, and I for me, I flourish in environments where I'm seen and heard, and like I can come in and be like, look, my cat just died. Like I'm really struggling. But like I felt like in that environment nobody would even have the time or the space or nobody even knows what holding space is, right? Like they don't even have those, like holding space is such a huge thing, right? Like in the spiritual community, it's so important to know how to hold space. And there's so many different levels and variations of how people do it and the levels of how much space people can hold. Even the people that are advanced space holders, they might be going through something and they may not be able to hold it that day as much. So it's very variable. And it also comes back to what we were just talking about, where the people that have done the most internal work seem to be the best space holders because they can completely have compassion and relate to what's happening to this individual
yeah,
and be fully present. That's another thing, right? Like full presence and fully being inside the body to allow and listen, fully listen to what the other
yeah.
individual is going through.
Totally. Well, I think as you were speaking, what came up for me was like, it's because those people that can do that have learned to hold space for themselves.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think that's a level of maturity that everyone should strive to get to so that we can actually help others. It's okay to need space held for us. We all need it at different times, you know, but we
Yeah,
also need to learn how to validate ourselves.
yeah,
And so we're not constantly seeking that validation for others or, you know what I mean? And because that just goes round and round and round, and it's just an empty hole that never gets filled,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
So,
and it brings up the subject of like a somatic release, right?
yeah,
Like if somebody's feeling something, let's say anger or sadness, right? Like it's an emotion that is normal for everybody, right? Like there's
yeah,
nothing wrong with any emotion. And I know you're really good at that, right? Like can you speak a little bit into that? So like if you're feeling something, do you allow yourself to go somewhere to fully experience the emotion if you can?
Yeah, I mean, now I get more spontaneous, like times where I'll just start to get teary-eyed and tears coming up and emotions, and I can really welcome it. And like we're talking about holding space, I can hold space for that in myself. But I used to feel emotions coming up, and I'd go get in my car and drive and turn the radio on, and I would just try to put on something sad, some kind of sad music that would help me, and then I would just cry and
Hmm.
scream and let it come out. I still do that kind of stuff occasionally, but
Hmm.
now I just noticed, for whatever reason, I think I've got to a place where it comes up easier,
Hmm.
and I don't need as much to try to trigger it. Mushrooms really helped me to get to
Hmm.
that point. Mushrooms and cacao really helped connect me and open my heart to where now it just kind of comes up. I can feel it coming up, and you know, and then I'll just start to cry, and I appreciate it, and I look at it as more of like a, you know, like a practice of healing and just letting that come up. I know that it needs to, and if I push it down, then it's gonna have to come up later or sometime.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
try to let it move through. But it's definitely been a journey to get to this point. Because there was a point when I can probably even when I first met you, it's like I wanted to cry really badly, and I just wasn't able to.
Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, and it's been beautiful to watch your journey, brother. Like all the ways that you've grown over the years, and
yeah,
it's been really powerful. We had a men's circle together in San Diego for several years during COVID,
yeah,
which was a really important time to bring men into their hearts and for them to
yeah,
really like feel their emotions and to really dive into it. I mean, there's so many tools now, to that I've acquired over the years that, really help with these things. And I think an important thing to bring up is the responsibility each one of us holds to have to take care of our energetic hygiene every day.
yeah,
Like every day, for me, my practice right now is waking up and doing a little meditation and then doing some hape, which
mm,
is like a tobacco um, that is from the Amazon that's blended into with other herbs into a powder, and you blow it into your nose, and it allows the body to purge and cleanse, and non-psychedelic, and
yeah,
allows just that really grounding, clearing experience. And for me, it's also been about remembering how to surrender, especially in those moments on medicine. It's like, okay, I can actually let all this go. I don't have to hold it anymore. There's no reason to hold it, I
yeah,
and that's a big topic in men's work, right? Like being able to truly like let go and just
mhm,
allow for the experience to happen.
yeah. It reminds me of one of my favorite books of all time that absolutely changed my life, which is Letting Go by David Hawkins. Dude, so good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's part of the goal is I noticed um as I'm getting older that it's about not holding on to things and just letting them move through you, whether
Right.
it's a negative experience that just happened and letting the emotion just move through you,
Hmm.
or whether it's like um, getting angry and just moving through it, or seeing a resentment that I'm holding on to and just letting go of it, or whatever. It's about letting them move through. Holding on to stuff just makes us heavy, closes the channels for energy, steals our energy,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, brother. Well, I think this is a good place to wrap it up. It's been
yeah.
such an honor to have you on here, man.
So good
Um,
to see you, brother. I love you,
yeah,
man.
I love you too, man. It's a true honor. Thank you again for sharing all your wisdom and for sharing your story. It's super powerful. You've shared parts of it with me in the past, but it's been really awesome to see it all in this way. So,
Yeah.
sending you so much love, brother. Until next time.
You too. Appreciate it, Peter. And thanks for letting me come on here and share some of my story. It felt really, really good. I don't get to share it very often. So thank you.
Amazing, brother. Thank you.
Okay.